Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Larry Epstein in for Richard French tonight. The Capitol police officer who gave his life defending lawmakers and the building itself on January 6th was honored in the rotunda today. This is yet another stark reminder of the violence that day, and it's why Democrats are pushing ahead with the Senate impeachment trial that's set to start next week. And more lawmakers are speaking out about what they faced on January 6th. That includes AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
And I just hear, "Where is she? Where is she?" I thought I was going to die. These folks who tell us to move on, that it's not a big deal, that we should forget what's happened, or even telling us to apologize, these are the same tactics of abusers. And I'm a survivor of sexual assault. And I haven't told many people that in my life.
Before I get to our first guest, here's the latest on the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump.
This morning, a somber remembrance inside the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. The cremated remains of an American hero lying in honor. The first family paying their final respects to fallen Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, killed in the January 6th insurrection. Hours earlier, House impeachment managers formally declaring it was former President Donald Trump who was singularly responsible for the violent attack that left 5 dead, including the officer, adding it was a betrayal of historic proportions.
Trump engaged in high crimes and misdemeanors by inciting violence against the government of the United States.
In the 80-page brief filed Tuesday, Democrats referencing Trump's own words just before the insurrection.
Because you'll never take back our country with weakness.
Saying after his failed efforts to overturn the presidential election, he worked the mob into a frenzy and aimed them like a loaded cannon down Pennsylvania Avenue.
If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
The impeachment manager citing these videos obtained by Just Security, showing the crowd responding to Trump in real time.
Take the Capitol right now!
The president's legal team directly pushing back in their own 14-page response, denying that Trump violated his oath of office, while suggesting an impeachment trial to convict a former president is unconstitutional.
The judge and jury has already announced publicly that the defendant must be convicted in this case.
The documents also foreshadowing Trump's attorney's plans to defend his false and baseless claims that he won the election.
Let's bring in our first guest tonight. Professor Alan Lichtman teaches at American University, and he's also the author of The Case for Impeachment. Your book, Professor, The Case for Impeachment, it could have come out now, but it actually came out before Trump was even impeached for the first time. You were talking about Russia at that point. Of course, he wound up getting impeached over the Ukraine thing, now over inciting an insurrection. Did you ever in your wildest dreams think that you'd see a president get impeached twice in one term?
Not until Donald Trump. You know, my book came out in April of 2017. And although I didn't, of course, anticipate the particular events that led to his second impeachment, the qualities that I outlined in my book help explain Donald Trump's transgressions. I pointed out that this was someone who throughout his entire career had no respect for the law, no respect for the truth, cared only about himself, and would ruthlessly pursue whatever he perceived to be his own self-interest, regardless of the consequences for the law, the Constitution, or anyone else. And so the second impeachment, the 2 impeachments, flow from Donald Trump's character, which really was expressed for decades, not only as a politician, but as a businessman as well.
Yesterday, Rich spoke with one of the Watergate prosecutors, Nick Ackerman, and Mr. Ackerman had an interesting take on what he thinks Democrats should do, so I would like to get your take on it. We'll play the soundbite and then get you to respond on the other side of it.
I think it's absolutely critical that they put Donald Trump on the stand just to show what a small petty and mean individual he is, because now that he's no longer the president, sitting on a witness stand, being cross-examined and ripped to shreds, is going to convince these senators that it's time to convict.
What do you think? Does he have a point?
Or put Donald Trump on the stand, and he is going to lie. He's going to perjure himself. He's done that, as I point out in my book, previously in depositions relevant to civil suits. We'll see all of Donald Trump's character flaws come out in any kind of testimony in a trial. It'll be a disaster for the president, but I don't think he'll submit readily to a subpoena. I think he'll file a lawsuit. His forte is delay, drag it all out.
Yeah, so he could block it, is what you're saying, if he wanted to run out the clock. We've seen that before with him. Both sides spelled out their cases yesterday, and you sent out a tweet, and you commented on just one particular part of what Trump's defense was. So I want to read that tweet back for our audience. Insufficient evidence exists upon which a reasonable jurist could conclude that the 45th president's statements about a stolen election were accurate or not, say Trump lawyers. You added your commentary at the end. You said nearly 90 judges, including many Trump appointees in some 60 cases, would beg to differ. Why is that the one part of the entire brief that you chose to comment on?
Because it was such a blatant lie. You know, there are ethics that lawyers should not perpetrate lies, and that's exactly what they did here. Their statement is directly contradicted by the verdict, as I said, of nearly 90 judges in 60 some odd cases, including Trump appointees, who thoroughly rejected the notion that this was a stolen election. Add to that the affirmation of every Republican and Democratic elected official across the land, Trump's own Department of Justice, and Trump's own Department of Homeland Security. I think Trump forced his lawyers to make that blatantly false statement, and I think they violated the basic code of ethics in doing so.
It seems like in the Senate that this thing's not going to go anywhere. It seems like it's going to be a very cold day in Mar-a-Lago before 17 Republicans actually vote to convict Donald Trump. Do you see it another way, or do you think there's really just no chance that they'll get more than a dozen Republicans?
Well, the great Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli once said, finality is not a word we use in politics. So there is some minuscule chance that Trump will be convicted, but the trial has great value regardless of its outcome, because it presents to the American people the way in which Trump has been a con man, a grifter, deceived them, and how that culminated in the horrible riot on January 6th that left at least 5 dead and well over 100 injured. And it's not just Trump's incitement on January 6th. This is incitement over 2 months and proof positive that this was not some inadvertent consequence of free speech that's politically protected. He did nothing when he watched the riots unfold in real time on television. In fact, according to eyewitnesses, watched with some delight. He didn't even respond to desperate cries for help from his own Republican allies in Congress who feared for their life. And then at 6 o'clock, he made a tweet that he quickly deleted, that he said, this is the consequence of great patriots who see an election stolen from them. In other words, Trump himself connected the dots between his own lies about election fraud and the insurrection on January 6th.
You've correctly predicted every presidential race since 7 or 8 of them, going back to Reagan. I think we've had you on the show to talk about that. Do you think he's going to run again, 2024? I know it's too soon to maybe think about that, but I'm already thinking about that.
I think it's kind of sad that we're thinking about such a disastrous president running again, but I think the chances are slim and none, and here's why. He is going to be too preoccupied over the next 4 years to be able to mount a real campaign for president. He has over $400 million in debt due. He has a potentially disastrous IRS audit on his back. He is facing numerous civil suits, including one from E. Jean Carroll, where she said he raped her in the 1990s. And like Monica Lewinsky and the blue dress, she says she has DNA evidence. he faces possible criminal prosecution in the Southern District of New York and from New York State authorities, and his Twitter platform has been cut off. He's got plenty to worry about other than running for president again.
Last question. The Republicans, one of their major defenses is that this whole thing is unconstitutional. He's no longer in office. There's some precedent, but not with a president, to impeach someone who's out of office. What's your take on it?
That's arrant nonsense. It's just an excuse for them not facing up to the gravity of what Donald Trump did in looking at a side issue. The U.S. Senate has twice voted on the question of whether you can impeach an official after that official has left office. And all officials, including the president, are subject to the same impeachment clause. And twice, in 1876, in the case of William Belknap, Secretary of War, who actually resigned even before he was impeached, much less tried. And then again this year, the Senate decisively voted that they do have jurisdiction over former officials. And let's not forget, the Constitution puts no time limit on impeachment and has a second punishment in addition to removal, and that is to prevent the individual from ever holding federal public office again. And I don't think they intended a time limit to cancel out that second punishment.
Thanks a lot, Professor. We appreciate it.
Take care.